Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. People are going to be rolling in now. We've got great attendance for this today. So if you're looking for the webinar with MCA featuring Sue Jentz from the State Arts Board, you're in the right place. You're in the right Zoom room. So welcome and thank you so much for coming today. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. A lot of familiar faces. Thank you so much for joining today. If you have a chance, go ahead in the chat and put what organization you're with, or if you're an artist, what type of medium you practice. And it's always great to see who is joining. So thank you so much. We'll get started in just a minute. Wow. If it isn't uplifting to see all of the names of the organizations from around the state that are with us today, I don't know what else could make your day. So thank you so much for joining. Again, if you're just joining, this is a webinar with Sue Jentz. We're talking today about the historic legacy amendment, the historic level of the legacy amendment, and how that impacts arts and culture organizations as well as individual artists. So thank you so much for joining us today. I'm just checking the time. It's a little bit after 1. I think what we're going to do is go ahead and get started. This is being recorded today. I have a list of questions that people have submitted in advance, and so we're going to try to get to as many as we can with over 200 attendees. That's a tall order, but we're so glad that you're all here today and joining. So we're going to get to as many questions as we can. And if not, we'll do our best to follow up afterwards. But thank you again so much for joining. Welcome to the MCA webinar featuring Sue Jentz, the Executive Director of the Minnesota State Arts Board. We are so excited that all of you as arts, as pioneers of great work in the arts across the state, we're so glad that you're here to join us today. All of the grassroots advocacy work that you did really helped us continue to secure these funds every year as they go through the legislature. And to talk a little bit about this and about the arts system we have here in Minnesota, which is the top in the nation, is Sue Jentz. So I'm going to turn it over to her. And again, if you have questions, you can always post them in the chat. Otherwise, I'll be going through and hitting those after Sue does her introduction. So we'll do our best to cover as much as we can today. So thank you. Sue, I'm turning it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah. It's wonderful to be here today. The only thing that would make it better is if we were all in the same room together. I see so many familiar names in the list of participants, and it's been so long since we've seen each other in person. So looking forward to that soon. I really appreciate this chance to give you a little bit of an update about what happened during this past legislative session, how that's going to impact the Minnesota State Arts Board, the Regional Arts Council system, and then ultimately the people who apply for and receive those grants. So I'm going to talk about two things today, a little bit about what happened and then also what happens next. But before I do that, I want to say thank you. Sarah has said this, but for any of you who talked with your legislators, who called them, who sent them a message, who participated in Advocacy Week, who kept legislators informed during your grant cycles, thanked them for a grant that you received. That is so important. Legislators must know how the dollars that are appropriated to the Arts Board and the Regional Arts Councils are benefiting the people who live in their districts and the communities in their districts. So thank you for doing that. That is really vital. So what happened? Well, if you are somebody who follows the legislative process very well, you know this was an extraordinary year, unlike any we've seen in a very, very long time. I've been bumping around the Capitol for more than 20 years, and I've never seen a budget session like this. Despite inflation and COVID, there was a big surplus. There was a lot of policy conversation and a lot of policy bills that were passed. There were two big capital investment bills that were passed and a $70+ billion 2-year state budget. And never do all three of those things happen in the same session. So a lot happened. And there's good news for us. So you heard about a $17.6 billion projected surplus in the state general fund, and state agencies like the Arts Board, if we were hoping for an increase, needed to ask for that last fall. We did. Last October, we asked for a $4 million increase. We did not get the $4 million increase. We got a $479,000 increase. And all of that money is earmarked for our operations and services line here at the Arts Board, specifically related to grants administration. And I'll talk about that in just a bit. But that puts us at about $15.6 million for the biennium. Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund was the place that we saw real increases. There was about a 28% increase in funds available from the legacy funds. And many of you know that there's language in state statute that says that 47% of the funds available from the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund need to be appropriated to the Arts Board and Regional Arts Council system. And so we asked for that. We asked for 47%, which was $90.7 million. We actually received 92.2 million. So 2 million over what we had asked for. And I will talk about that extra 2 million in a bit. So for fiscal 24, we have $47 million available for the Arts Board and Regional Arts Councils from the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. For fiscal 25, it goes down a bit, down to 44.7. And again, I'll talk about all of that. The last thing is that we also received a little bit of an increase from our state grant from the National Endowment for the Arts, and we use a portion of that in our grant programs for individual artists. So increases all around, which was tremendous news. It was a really great outcome for us. It wasn't always easy, but we got where we needed to in the end. So the question about what happens next. I've been talking about bienniums. I'm going to switch now to fiscal years. So the Arts Board's fiscal year ends next week. Next Friday is the end of our fiscal 23 fiscal year. And we are actually already into fiscal 24 grant cycle, even though that fiscal year starts the 1st of July. So here's what we do in this order. First and foremost, we are in the process now of transferring funds to the 11 regional arts councils. If you don't know your regional arts council, find them. Get to know them, get to know what's available in your part of the state from your regional arts council. In every budget, the legislature tells us what portion of the funds that have been appropriated must be passed through to the regional arts councils. It's called a legislatively mandated grant. And the amounts for this year will increase overall 2.6 million. So the regional arts councils together will have more than $15 million coming into their budgets. Each regional arts council is an independent nonprofit organization. They decide how they're going to invest those dollars, and they have local decision-making authority. So the kind of grant programs, the kind of services that you can expect from your regional arts council will be different depending on where you are in the state. And they are in the process now of deciding how they are going to invest those dollars. They have a plan for the next 2 years, and they will be standing up grant programs or other kinds of programs for the coming year. And so I can't encourage you enough to check in with your regional arts council about what might be available. The second thing we're doing, I'd mentioned that there is more money in the first year of the biennium from legacy than the second. That's in great part because there's a special $2 million allocation that we must use for a public art project at the Minnesota United Soccer Stadium. And so that $2 million comes off the top and will go into that project, and that'll be managed by our public art administrator. We also obviously received increased funds available for our grant programs. And so I'm guessing that's why many of you are interested in finding out what that means. So we're going to have more than $35 million available to put into our competitive grant programs for fiscal 24. It's a $6 million increase from the previous year. So it's a nice, healthy increase. In February, we announced 6 grant programs. The 2 creative support programs, which we referred to as our COVID relief programs, have been discontinued. And instead, we're offering other programs that are more in line with what the Constitution says the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund dollars must be used to support. The grant programs still are going to be quite flexible. They're going to look a lot like creative support in many ways. We learned a lot, I think, during COVID about how to make programs more flexible. We're also going to be continuing to use the priority groups that we have identified as we allocate funds. So if you've been applying in the last 2 or 3 years, you know that we've prioritized applicants from Greater Minnesota, applicants who identify as BIPOC, or organizations led by people who identify as BIPOC, or individuals with disabilities, organizations led by people with disabilities, or organizations that exist to serve people with disabilities. So those same 3 priority groups will be used as we allocate funds for the coming year. I'm going to share some numbers and some dates with you, but you don't have to write any of these down. They're all on our website. So if you haven't yet looked at the Arts Board's website and the Arts Board calendar, please do. Any of the dates that I'm going to share with you are already there. So I'll talk a little bit about those 6 programs. First one is the operating support program. Those applications came in back in January. We had more applications this year. We had about 200 applications in that program. But we also have an additional $3.5 million in that program. So we have not yet awarded those grants. The board will approve those in July, and then those grant cycles, the grant period will start as soon as grant contracts are signed. Usually that's about early middle of August by the time everybody signs their contract. We are offering creative individuals again. It looks exactly like creative support for individuals. We've changed the name just a little bit. Again, those are $10,000 maximum grants. We've had 1 grant deadline already, but there is a second deadline coming up. So if you are interested in considering a grant for an individual artist, take a look at that deadline. It will be the 28th of July. I was going to say January. That's wrong. And just like previous years, the funds can be used for an artist to improve their practice, expand their own professional development as an artist, and also stay connected to Minnesotans through their work. We're trying out one brand new program this year called Accessible Arts. We want the dollars to be used by arts organizations or arts affiliates of other nonprofits or public entities to increase their capacity to make their work accessible to people with disabilities on the longer term. So that might be professional development for staff or volunteers or other artists. It might be training. It might be an ADA accessibility plan or assessment. It's not meant to be an accessibility accommodation for a single program or a single series of activities. We're hoping you're already doing that. It's really about helping your organization to become better integrating your accessibility work in all that you do. That deadline is next Friday. So if you're thinking about that program, do it quickly. You've got a few days yet to do that. And then I'd mentioned that we're offering 3 programs that come directly out of the language from the state constitution. So we're offering an arts education program, an arts experiences program, and a cultural expression program. All of those have a $35,000 maximum grant. 2 of those deadlines have passed. One of them is still coming up. The arts experiences applications are due the 21st of July. Arts education and cultural expression have both passed. If you have looked at our website or if you've looked at the materials, you know that you have to choose one of those. You can't apply in all three of them, but you have to choose one of those. We're doing that because we found during COVID, as we made slightly smaller grants and we spread them out, that we were able to serve more communities, more parts of the state, and more potential grant recipients. So we're going to continue that going forward. I'm seeing that Mark is putting in the chat some resources. Take a look, go to our website. He's also segued to something I wanted to do, just a couple of tips, and then we'll move into questions. I mentioned that our calendar is on our website, all of those dates of when applications are due and when the grant funds can be used. All of that's on our calendar page. You can also find a tag, there's a tab for information sessions. We have an information session recorded for all of our grant programs. So you can listen to a 1-hour info session and questions about all of those. We also have program overviews and information on program web pages, and reach out to our staff. We're using a team approach among programs this year. So you'll see a creative individual's email address. You'll see an arts experiences email address so that we can work as a team rather than identifying specifically one person. 4 other really quick things, and then I'll stop talking and we'll get to some of the questions. But if you have not been getting emails directly from us as we've rolled out programs or announced programs, it means we don't have you on our email distribution list. So go to the middle of the Arts Board's homepage, click in the section that says stay in touch and give us your email address. We send out e-blasts on a regular basis, reminders when deadlines are coming up. 3 other things to think about. One is we are a very citizen-driven process. We recruit about 350 people a year to read applications, score them, and help us decide which we're going to fund. If you are not an applicant in a particular grant program, you could serve as an advisor. And we are always looking for new people who would like to be advisors. Or if you have friends who are interested in the arts, even if they don't work in the arts, the more people who know about the amazing arts individuals and organizations around the state, the more people who know how strong our review process is and our grants management process is, the better. So take a look at that. Think about whether you'd like to be an advisor. I mentioned capital investment. There are a lot of new public projects coming up, and the state has a percent for art program, which says that up to 1% of many of those projects can be used for arts. So we're expecting there will be new opportunities for public artists, and we will be looking for people who can serve as selection committee members for percent for arts. So it's going to be really exciting. We think there'll be a lot of new projects coming up. And finally, I had mentioned that we got some additional resources for staffing. We've got a few open positions right now, but we will be adding positions. If you know somebody, or if you're interested in possibly one of the positions at the Arts Board, take a look. We have an employment opportunities page. We have 2 positions posted right now. One is an advisor recruitment position. The other is a grant programs assistant. Next week, we will be posting a program officer position. And then as we design these additional grant administrative positions, we'll post those as well. So please spread the word. We're always looking for people who'd like to join our team and help support the great work that you all are doing. And I'm going to stop there and let's have a conversation, Sarah.
All right. Thank you so much, Sue. What a lot of great information. Again, I'll be acting as moderator, and so I'm just going to be relaying questions that we've gotten from the field and from the previously issued questions, and then also things that are popping up. One of the questions, just to kind of just to lift up, is when should organizations budget for that increase? When does the increase actually hit? Like what month or year? And then how should organizations budget, especially for operating support? Does it mean it's a 28% or 30% increase? What does that mean?
Sure, good questions. So the money would be available at the beginning of whatever is the grant period. So for example, in operating support, once those contracts are signed, we start making payments on those grants. We don't pay out the full grant all in one payment. It gets spread out over a few payments. So if an organization is receiving operating support, they would see that grant amount starting by August. If instead It's one of the arts experiences grants. I have to look at my cheat sheet here. I think those are going to be approved in our March meeting. So those dollars would actually be available starting in May of next year. And I know that's a long time away. Part of the reason we had asked for more money for staffing is that we've got this really long process because our staff is so small. So the dollars are available to the grantee after we've signed the grant contract for each of the programs. And I forgot the other half of your question. Oh, how much? How much? So there's in operating support, in creative individuals, and in the 3 legacy programs, the funding available in all of those programs is going to be 21% more in fiscal 24 than we have now. As far as operating support goes, there are a number of factors that determine the grant sizes. The amount of money, so we know that that has increased. The number of applicants, we know that that has increased as well. And then merit scores impact the grant sizes. We are still using 18 and 19 as the budget years, so the changes in organizations' budgets won't impact the formula part of their awards, but the merit parts of their awards would be impacted by the organizations going through their full cycle and getting a new merit score this year. And each individual organization that receives an operating support grant, there are at least 5 or 6 different factors that influence the size of that grant. I would encourage you, after we announce those grants, if you have questions, we have a brand new operating support program officer, Lindy Holliday, and you can reach out to Lindy. She should be very happy to explain those and help understand why your grant might have changed in the way that it would change.
And Sue, a couple follow-up questions. So we've had a lot of questions about who is eligible for general operating support.
In the operating support program, we can fund 4 types of organizations: arts producers, arts presenters, community art schools and conservatories, and artist service organizations. And we have a lot of artist service organizations in Minnesota. Applicants must either be an arts organization or must be an arts affiliate of a nonprofit or a public institution. And we have a description, we have definitions of what we consider to be an arts organization and what we consider to be an arts affiliate. And I always say, everyone has a different idea of what those phrases mean. So in order for us to be clear and consistent with all applicants, we do have definitions. So take a look at those. The applicant must have been established and operating for 2 years. They must have at least 1 paid staff member. And we always set a minimum budget size. And right now that minimum budget size is $174,000. And we've kept that same minimum budget size for a few years. In the past, we were increasing that every 2 years. We put that on pause during COVID and didn't increase that budget size.
And Sue, for organizations that have experienced growth since the beginning of COVID, which we hope that many organizations have, when do you think that the budget years will readjust or go to more, kind of move up and get closer to our current budget years?
Sure. I see a lot of operating support grantees in the participant list, so I'm sure this is a question on everybody's mind. We are in the conversation right now looking at that. We have a board committee, an operating support board committee, that's looking at a variety of things related to operating support, and that's one of the things we're going to look at. Is it time for us to go back to using more currently completed fiscal years? And it certainly may be. I wouldn't say that any organization is completely free of the effects of COVID. I think we're all going to feel that for a long time to come. But at least now we have a better sense of how COVID has impacted organizations and how they have adjusted to that. So we're certainly talking about, is it time now to go back to more current fiscal years?
And what about when organizations were funded, or when they were founded rather? Again, so many organizations have popped up in the last few years. you know, especially with fiscal year 24 operating, it's open to organizations founded fiscal year 19. You know, when does that change? Does it change for the fiscal year 25 funding bucket? Or is that deadline still January?
So the application deadline has been in January, and we're expecting that that would stay. And the reason we have that deadline in January is because then we can award those grants as soon as the new fiscal year starts. We can get that work done by July. So that one is always the first one out of the gate. The question about an organization being established for 2 years, that's actually in the Arts Board's administrative rules. And now I'm getting into a level of detail that most of you may or may not be interested in, but the arts administrative rules that are an extension of law. And so if we were to change that established for 2 years, we would have to do so through a much longer, at least a year plus process. And I will say the reason that the Arts Board has had that longstanding practice in operating support is when that program was created and when the Regional Arts Council system really started to grow up, the idea was really small new organizations were likely to be funded by their Regional Arts Council as they grew and kind of got established. And then after 2 years, they might have a budget size and they might have the kind of infrastructure so that they would start to come to the Arts Board for funding. That's certainly one of the things that we're also looking at in our operating support committee. Is that assumption still true? Is it still a good assumption to have in that one program? I will say that in our other grant programs, in the 3 COVID grant programs, or not COVID, in the 3 legacy grant programs, we don't have that same expectation that you have to be specific kinds of organizations. Those are open to broader, not just arts organizations, but arts programs in other kinds of nonprofit or public organizations. And it's also open to informal groups that are using fiscal sponsors. Those 3 programs also are open to individual artists. So if there is an opportunity, especially now with arts experiences that an artist might want to look at, that program is open.
And what would you recommend to artists or arts organizations rather that don't fit into that threshold of 174,000? What would you recommend to them, to smaller organizations? What would you recommend to them as they explore arts funding?
Yep. Well, the other grant programs that we offer in the past, creative support for organizations was also open to smaller organizations, to fiscally sponsored organizations. This year, those 3 legacy programs were open more broadly. And so those grants are an option. Because 2 of our deadlines have already passed, I would say take a look at the Arts Experiences Grant Program to see if that would be a fit. And that's very broad. It's, it's creating, producing, presenting lots of different arts activities all around the state of Minnesota. Public art is also included in that, and just a whole variety of things. So it's very broad. I hope people will find an opportunity there.
Another question is, if you get one grant, are you eligible for other grants? Can you win them all? What are some of your rules around how many grants you can get?
Sure. So this year, again, based on what we experienced during COVID, individual artists can apply in one program. No, wrong. Can submit one application in one of 4 programs, either creative individuals or the 3 legacy programs, arts experiences, arts education, or cultural expression. So one application if you're an individual. If you're an organization, you are able to submit no more than 3 applications, one for operating support, one for accessible arts if you decide you want to do that, and one in one of the 3 legacy programs. So organizations can apply up to 3 times, individuals once.
Another question is, when the State Arts Board decreased grants from 100,000 as a maximum to 35,000, do you see that, and kind of limiting the number of grants for which artists can apply, do you see any of that going back, or what has been the impact of that change? And do you see those levels going back up in future years?
Sure. When we were awarding grants that were much larger, what we found is that we were able to award many fewer grants. And so we were investing very heavily in a smaller number of activities. And what we found during COVID by decreasing the grant sizes is that we were able to provide funding to many, many more individuals, many, many more organizations, and those activities still happened. So in the past, where we might have been the only source of support for a project or an activity, now I think the expectation is we want to invest, we want to be one of the funders for an activity, but we also want these dollars to reach more Minnesotans. And so we can fund more grants, we can fund more applications if the grants are smaller. We did take a look back at the last few years, and the average grant size in our project grants was about $30-some thousand. So a $35,000 grant is kind of spot on with what the average had been in the past.
Got it. And then for those who were a follow-up to the question about when organizations were founded, if an organization, for all the organizations funded in fiscal year 19, they were told not to apply due to COVID, or that they couldn't apply due to COVID. Wondering if that start date will be for 20 or fiscal year 25 general operating.
Can you
So-
say again, organizations founded in 2019 were told not to apply?
We're told they couldn't apply due to COVID. Wondering that the start date will be, wondering what the start date would be for fiscal year 25 general operating grant.
So in operating support, we've consistently said the organization must have been established for at least 2 years. So January of 24, an organization would have to have been established and operating for at least 2 years prior to January of 2024. And that's always been the case in operating support. It's always been 2 years.
But if you're using the 18 and 19 budget numbers, how do people, I have a feeling that's what the question's maybe getting at, then what do you use?
I see. I was not understanding.
Yeah.
If we move to a different 2-year average qualifying expenses, and if we use more current fiscal years, and I say if because the board has not made these decisions, and I never want to get out ahead of the board, it would be likely that the 2 years would be 21 and 22. I think that's what would have been our past practice. And so if that decision is made to use more current fiscal years, we would announce which 2 years it would be in the guidelines. And then we would base the 2-year average expenses based on those 2 years.
About the application process. So we had quite a few people, and I think you answered a lot of the questions people had about the application process. I'm wondering if I'll ask some of these questions. Do you see any other changes in eligibility rules? And also what is, I'm just going to look here to make sure we hit these. And what types, I know you hit on this a little bit when you talk about arts, what are some of, what are considered arts organizations that can apply, including nonprofit and fiscal agent situations?
Okay, so the first question was about eligibility. So eligibility for fiscal 24, obviously, since all of those programs have been announced, those are in place. I'd be curious about what if there is some group that is not eligible now that people are wondering about. So in operating support, I'd mentioned some of the eligibility requirements, and most of those eligibility requirements are in our rules. So if those change, it would take a longer time. We wouldn't necessarily be able to change that even for the fiscal 25 cycle. In the other programs, those are things that we can change because they're all considered new programs at this point, and we could change those next year. In the 3 legacy programs, arts education, cultural expression, arts experiences, those are open to arts organizations, arts affiliates, arts programming that is in a non-arts organization, like a community organization or another nonprofit. We've seen a lot of programming in senior centers, and schools are eligible to apply again. They had not been eligible during COVID. We wanted to concentrate our dollars on those people in the arts and cultural community, and so now schools can apply again, and public entities. Tribal governments, city governments that might have arts programming that they sponsor, summer theater programs, summer, those sorts of things. So those three programs are very broad. Fiscally sponsored groups can apply in those programs, and individuals. So eligibility is different based on the program. And the three legacy programs are the ones that are the broadest as far as eligibility.
Got it. I'm going through here, and I want to give you, this will be a little bit of an open-ended question, but we had quite a few questions around DEI, and how does the Arts Board focus money to make sure that it's getting to those BIPOC organizations, or LGBTQIA plus, and how do those legacy dollars and that increase help underserved communities access those funds?
Good question, and an important question. Thank you for that. So I'd mentioned the three priority groups that we put in place during COVID, and we will continue to use those in, they're in all of the programs right now except operating support. And they really have helped us do two things. One was to increase the number of applications we were receiving from those three groups, and also to ensure that we would be awarding more grants to those groups. And it really has made a big difference for us. The other thing that's in all of the applications now, in all of the application questions, is how does this proposed activity serve underserved communities? And underserved communities can be defined by the applicant because it's different based on who they are, where they live, and who they serve. And so we ask in all the applications, what is your connection to this community, and how will this community be served? And it is a big part of the score that's provided. We do have an equity committee that has been talking about, is there equitable access to the arts in Minnesota? Are there people or communities that are not being well served? That will be a longer process for us, obviously, but it will be looking at all of the things we do, and that work will continue into the future. The operating support committee that I talked about is having conversations about who is being served by operating support, who is receiving the funding, who is being served. So it's part of all of the conversations that we're having at this moment. I think it is probably a part of the conversation that we all are having at this moment. How are these taxpayer dollars reaching as many Minnesotans as possible? And are people feeling like they're having the kind of access they would like?
A couple of questions about individual artists. So if you're an individual artist, do you want to talk a little bit about what they're going to need and how they would qualify? Specifically around, we've had a couple questions about having grants for work that's already done, and a lot of questions about needing the money to complete that work. If you could address that, that would be wonderful.
Sure. So one of the restrictions in state government is that we can never provide funding for something that has already happened. We can't pay for past activities. We can't pay for past debts. We can only pay for things that will take place during the grant period. And that's not just for the Arts Board. That's any state grant, any state contract must be for current work. So if an artist had a big project that they were working on, the application should talk about the part of the project that they could complete during the grant period. And that's why we put the grant periods on our calendars, so that you can think about, well, how much work or where would I be in this project during that particular 12-month period of time? And then the proposal should talk about that. With individual artists, and this is a question we often get, individual artists ask if they can pay themselves. And yes, absolutely. Building in money in that grant to pay themselves for the time, for the creative time, as well as other costs. And so you can easily propose just part of a project. And in fact, you don't necessarily have to have a fully completed project in our grant programs, but you need to have things that will connect with Minnesotans during the project. Keeping in mind that these are public taxpayer dollars and the ultimate beneficiaries have to be Minnesotans. We want there to be some way that that you can connect with an audience. So if you're, let's say you're composing a score and you're using the funds to do that, could you do, could you do a concert, even an online concert, or could you talk about your process? Could you do a lecture demonstration to talk about how you're writing this score? Just some way that Minnesotans can be connected to that work, because ultimately that's what we're trying to do. We're connect the work of artists with the people in Minnesota who want to be involved in that work and to experience it. So you can be specific about what you could accomplish in that 1 year period. You can also reach out to our program officers if you have questions about whether what you're planning to propose might be something that would work well in that grant, in that particular 1 year period, or if they have advice about something else that you might want to propose. Same would be true in the 3 other programs, the arts experiences, cultural expression, and arts education. Whatever is proposed needs to fit into that 1 year grant period. And that can include the planning or the completion of a project or a part of a project that would help connect Minnesotans to your art in some way.
Thank you for that. How is the money, we have quite a few questions around Greater Minnesota. How is the money divided up between this, between kind of the metro area and the rest of the state?
Sure. So let me talk first about the regional arts councils. There are 11 of them. And again, if you don't know your regional arts council, and if you haven't looked at the grant opportunities available from your regional arts council, please do. One of the things, one of the common misconceptions that I hear is that if you apply to the Arts Board, you cannot also apply to your regional arts council, or vice versa. If you apply to your regional arts council, you can't apply to the Arts Board. There are some programs, there are some restrictions that are different from region to region. So check in with your region, but the Arts Board doesn't have a rule that says you cannot apply to both the Arts Board and a regional arts council. So start there. So the regional arts council I'd mentioned, the legislature tells us specifically how much of the appropriated dollars will be passed through to the regional arts councils. The 11 councils together decide how they're going to divide up the dollars. And they have a formula that determines how much will go to Five Wings in the center of the state versus Arrowhead Regional Arts Council in the northeast corner of the state. And the 11 of them decide that together, which is great. We're very happy with that. And then that's how much we pass through to them. As far as the Arts Board, we don't specifically allocate this much will go to Greater Minnesota, this much will go to Metro. It depends on who applies. And in all of those programs where we're using the priority groups, what we say is that the percentage of grants to those groups will be equal to or greater than the percentage of applications. So if I'm just going to make up an example here. If 30% of the applications in the arts education program come from applicants in Greater Minnesota, at least 30% of the grants are going to go to Greater Minnesota. And that was one of the ways that we have been working to deal with some of the disparities that we had seen in the past, where applicants from those 3 priority groups were applying, but the percentage of the grants that they were receiving were not on par with the overall percentage of grants that we had awarded.
So someone just asked, why is the amount for money for a specific grant less in Greater Minnesota?
I'm going to guess what this question is about. For the Arts Board, the amount of the grant in any of our project grant programs, Creative Individuals or the 3 legacy programs, Accessible Arts, there is no difference in the size of the grant. based on where someone is. And our process at the Arts Board is that if a proposal is scored highly enough to be funded, we will fully fund that amount. So if an organization asks for $25,000 and the proposal is scored highly enough to be funded, we will give that organization $25,000. With some other funders, sometimes if you ask for 25, you'll get 15 or you'll get 10, something like that. We don't do that. I'm going to guess about the question, and maybe the question was about the difference in grant sizes that the Arts Board makes versus the regional arts councils.
Yes, that is right.
And that goes back to what I said way back at the beginning, that the regional arts councils decide the grant programs that they want to offer. They also set their own grant amounts. So if you have a question or a concern about the size of grant that your regional arts council is awarding, please talk to them. Their staffs are very open, they're very accessible, and they would like to hear from you. But we don't tell the regional arts councils the size of the grants that they should award. We don't tell them what grants they should award. Those are all local decisions made by those boards and those staffs of the regional arts councils.
How are, a number of questions were, how and when do these grants change over time? You know, what is the process for changing or morphing or turning the grants into different type of funding mechanisms for arts organizations?
Good questions. So the Arts Board in 2010, when the Legacy Amendment was passed, or when the Legacy Amendment started, we did a very large kind of listening tour around the state. How did people want those legacy dollars to be spent? What did they want to accomplish with those? One of the things I think that anybody who has applied to the Arts Board or the Regional Arts Councils know, we always ask about measurable outcomes. The law says there have to be measurable outcomes. What will be different because of this? So based on that original tour, we created, I think we were offering 10 grant programs from fiscal 10 until fiscal 20. And the programs didn't change from year to year. They changed a little bit, but those 10 didn't change really from year to year. And then COVID hit in 2020. And we had already announced our grant programs for 2020, and we had already started to take in applications. But we realized that the arts community had to stop on a dime and change what it was doing. And so we needed to do the same thing. And so that's why we suspended all but one of our programs. Operating support continued, and moved the money into those 2 creative support programs. So that the money could reach farther, it could be more flexible, and it was really about adapting, figuring out how to continue to create work, continue to connect with an audience in whatever way possible. We heard from legislators concerns about that, about the Constitution says arts education, arts access, cultural expression, cultural heritage. And so we did a number of surveying. We've done some of our own surveying. We've been hiring Wilder Research to be conducting surveys about, you know, can we go back to something that has a little bit more structure that better aligns with the Legacy Amendment? And so that's why we've moved to the programs that we're offering this year. Again, they're still very broad, but we now can very specifically point to, we're offering an arts education program. And I will say there was a lot of conversation about arts education among legislators this year. They're really interested in what kind of opportunities are available, especially for kids. They're very interested in arts access, and so encouraging all of us to support free programming. And we know that many of our grantees, many of the Regional Arts Council grantees, are already providing free programming. So we just need to lift that up and make that more visible so that everyone can take advantage of those. But now we can easily say we are following the intent of the Legacy Amendment by offering those 3 programs.
Sue, this is really helpful. I'm hearing back from so many people saying this is wonderful because it's a lot of specific questions. A question, something that I think is important for everyone is, if they have questions, or if they're just wondering if they should apply or could they apply, or really specific questions that would really only pertain to their organization, who is the best person to reach out to, and how and when can they do that?
Sure. So if you're interested in a specific grant program, I'd encourage you to go to the grant program page on our website, and there will be either the name of a person to contact, or there's going to be the email address to the program officer team that can respond to you. We are mostly working remotely, so email is a really good way to grab people rather than phone calls, although obviously we all are still making phone calls and can make phone calls. The other thing that we are now doing, which is great, there was a hiring freeze during COVID, so we couldn't fill positions, but within the last year, we have hired a new outreach coordinator, and she's fantastic. Her name is Anique Dahl-Desbois, and she has started going out and doing information sessions again. She just was at 4 or 5 events in the last week. And so she's always a good person if you are like not sure which of the programs might be a good fit. She can help do a little bit of matchmaking on that. You can reach out to me. I respond to emails as often as I can, and I am one of the program officers in the Accessible Arts program, since that's brand new. So Anique and I are managing that program. So don't ever hesitate to reach out to us. Even if, if you reach out to a person who doesn't have the answer, they're going to get you in touch with the person who can give you the answer. So feel free to do that. And I'm going to offer on behalf of my Regional Arts Council colleagues, some names that I see on the list. Do the same with them. We know that we may send out emails. We try to get the information out as broadly as we can, but we don't get to everybody, and not everybody sees this information. So feel free to call us. Feel free to send us an email, ask questions. The dollars belong to all Minnesotans, and our goal is to get the dollars out to as many Minnesotans and reach as many individuals and communities as possible. So we're always eager to hear if you have questions.
That's very helpful. And I want to answer one question too. We are recording this, so we'll be able to send out that information. As we've been talking, Mark Albers from our office has been putting all kinds of great links for information in the chat. So we'll make sure to continue to push those out. I would recommend signing up for our MCA email list at our MCA website. I would also say, in addition to thanking Sue for taking so much time today and for the work of the State Arts Board, as well as the Regional Arts Councils, a number of which are joining us today. Thank you so much for joining us and all the work that you do across the state. I want to say thank you for all of that work that you do. MCA, to clarify a little bit too, MCA's sole purpose is to lobby the legislature for the funds that then go into this system. And the system has been working well, and that separation for MCA, we don't grant any money. We get a lot of questions, and so this is maybe a good forum for us to partner with the State Arts Board and with the Regional Arts Council directors. But I do want to say that, again, we're lobbying for the funds that then fuel the system. And so if you haven't already become a member, we would appreciate it. You can also sign up for information. Your organization can be a member. The more we can thank the legislature for these funds, the more that you can reach out and say thank you for these funds. Our money from legacy is based on sales tax increases and based on the sales tax, and that appropriation. And so with more money becomes a little bit more, let's just say there's more hands in the cookie jar when there are a lot of money in legacy funds. And so we're always working really hard to maintain that 47% and make sure that the funds are going to the State Arts Board and the Regional Arts Council system. We even have a link on our website that can help you say thank you, so you don't have to look up information. There's also an email distribution list at the State Arts Board that's important to get on, so that you can get emails about deadlines and information about grants. So again, we want to thank you for that. I hope that this was useful. It would be really helpful if you could post in the chat I know we weren't able to get to every question, but we want to be respectful of everyone's time. I'm hoping that it's helpful. So if you can take a minute to let us know if this is something you'd want to see in the future. And Sue, do you have some closing thoughts or closing words?
Well, something you said just triggered something. Right now, there is a language in state statutes that says the Arts Board and Regional Arts Council systems must receive 47% of what's available from the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. And we take, I won't say we take that for granted, but we count on that. We talk about protecting our legacy funds. State statute can be changed at any moment. Any session, that language could be changed. And so we cannot be complacent. We cannot assume that it is a permanent guarantee. And one of the mottos here at the Arts Board is that we earn these dollars from the legislature every day by how we invest them. And so the legacy amendment will continue to be in place until 2034. We expect sometime before then there will be a campaign to have it be renewed. And we all have to work really hard to make sure that in 7, 8, 9 years, when Minnesotans are asked if they think the legacy amendment has been a good investment, that as many Minnesotans as possible investment, and we want it to continue. And so continuing to talk to legislators about how the dollars are reaching their districts, how people who live in their districts are better off, how communities are stronger, how kids have better futures, how older adults are thriving, how communities are, just clicking, and there's a lot of new energy. Legislators need to hear that, because this year with so much surplus, there were so many new people asking for state dollars, so many new people that had never received state funding before. So it's important for our legislative friends to hear from us and know that we are investing these dollars in really valuable ways.
Absolutely. And we're going to start doing kind of advocacy in a box, or kind of tips for your time outside of session. And so one of the tips I'll just kind of throw out there today as kind of a challenge to the arts community would be invite your legislators to do a welcome at your camps this summer. If you have camps, if you have a performance, if you're working on a public project, invite legislators to come and tour your facility, do a welcome, invite them in to see this. So many of them are back in their districts for the summer. I think it's really important to just invite them in and lift them up and thank them publicly for that allocation. And so that'll be my challenge to you, to all of you, especially with camps going on. What's more impactful to a legislator than to be able to see all the kids in the community coming together around the arts. Again, watch our emails for other tips and thank yous and things that you can do to support the arts year round. And again, thank you so much for joining today. We'll be sending out this webinar as well as links. So please stay in touch with us and make sure that you keep advocating for all these great funds. It truly is what sets Minnesota apart from the rest of the country, is our investment in the arts. And I have to say, I'll just speak on behalf of Sue. The arts are so strong in Minnesota because of the work that each of you do. And this funding is possible because of that great work and dedication from each of you. And so thank you so much. Again, thanks for joining today. Watch for other things, other webinar opportunities from MCA as we go forward. But again, my thanks to Sue Jentz and the Minnesota State Arts Board, your staff and board, for all of the great work that you do. And again, thank you so much to all the regional arts councils as well. What great leadership across the state and great programs. None of us want your jobs having to figure out how to get this money to so many organizations. So thank you so much. And thank you to everyone for joining.
Thank you, Sarah. Thanks for the great work that you and everyone at MCA does. It's a pleasure to work together. We've got a really great, strong state system, and please be in touch with all of us. We want to be as helpful and responsive as we can be.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you out at arts events all summer long, all year long, but especially this summer, it'll be fun to see everyone. So enjoy the rest of your day. And thanks again so much for joining us. Thank you, Sue.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.